Within every human being flows a hidden river of life, a subtle current moving through the spine, carrying not only breath and vitality, but consciousness itself. Most people live unaware of this sacred stream. They hurry through days driven by habit, emotion, and restless thought, believing that growth must come slowly through time, struggle, and chance. Yet evolution is not an accident of centuries alone. It is a conscious process written into the very design of the human nervous system. When that inner current is directed with understanding, the soul advances with certainty, as a seed rises inevitably toward the sun when given water and light. True spiritual progress is not based on blind belief or emotional excitement. It rests upon law, exact, dependable, and universal. Just as gravity governs the fall of an apple and electricity obeys precise principles. The body is a living laboratory, the breath its delicate instrument, and awareness the observing scientist. When the life force is withdrawn from outward distractions and guided upward through the spinal channel, consciousness begins to refine itself. Energy that once fed the senses is transformed into perception, intuition, and calm strength. In this inner ascent, evolution is accelerated because the soul is no longer scattered, it is gathered. Human suffering arises largely from misdirected energy. When the life force rushes outward through the senses, it binds awareness to pleasure and pain, attraction and fear. But when that same force is gently reversed, when it is taught to flow inward and upward, the mind becomes still without suppression, and joy arises without cause. This is not mysticism born of imagination. It is an experience repeatable by anyone who applies the method with patience and reverence. Just as controlled breathing can calm the heartbeat, so controlled life force can awaken higher states of consciousness. In this sacred science, breath is not merely air. It is the visible aspect of an invisible power. By refining the breath, one refines thought. By calming the breath, one stills the waves of the mind. As the breath becomes subtle, the awareness detaches from the body's demands and begins to sense a greater identity, vast, luminous, and free. The spine becomes a ladder of ascent, each center of consciousness a step toward expanded awareness. Progress is measured not by years but by depth of inner silence and clarity of perception. The goal of this discipline is not escape from life but mastery within it. As inner awareness grows, outer action becomes more harmonious. Fear loosens its grip, habits weaken, and compassion flows naturally. The practitioner does not withdraw from the world but moves within it with a calm center, guided by intuition rather than impulse. Evolution, then, is no longer a slow push from behind by pain, it becomes a conscious pull from within by joy. This scientific approach to spiritual growth restores dignity to the seeker. It teaches that enlightenment is not reserved for a chosen few, but is the natural destiny of every soul willing to discipline attention and energy. Through daily practice, the nervous system is refined, the mind clarified, and consciousness lifted beyond limitation. Step by step, breath by breath, the human being learns to cooperate with the divine intelligence already at work within, accelerating the journey from instinct to insight, from restlessness to realization. From mere existence to awakened life, the spinal current is not merely an anatomical feature, but a living channel of intelligence through which consciousness expresses its deepest purpose. Flowing silently behind the visible structure of bone and nerve, it serves as the main highway of life force, carrying awareness from the lowest instinctive centers to the highest regions of perception. When this current moves outward, dispersed through the senses, attention becomes fragmented and bound to external stimuli. When it is guided inward and upward, awareness gathers itself, and the scattered forces of mind and vitality begin to align into a single, purposeful stream. All genuine growth follows direction. A river that spreads into marshland loses its strength, but when guided between banks, it carves mountains and sustains civilizations. In the same way, human energy must be given a channel if it is to fulfill its evolutionary role. The spinal pathway is that channel. It connects the physical with the subtle, the instinctive with the intuitive, the personal with the universal. Each movement of life force along this inner axis refines perception, lifting consciousness from identification with the body toward awareness of the soul's continuity. The body was designed as an instrument of ascent. Within the spinal centers lie dormant capacities of understanding that unfold only when the life current is consciously directed. These centers are not symbols or beliefs, they are states of awareness experienced as changes in perception, emotion, and clarity. As energy rises, fear yields to calm, restlessness softens into concentration, and thought becomes luminous rather than compulsive. The practitioner does not imagine progress, it is felt as an inner lightness and an increasing freedom from automatic reactions. Evolution is often misunderstood as something imposed by time alone, as though waiting were sufficient for growth. Yet time merely provides opportunity, direction provides transformation. The spinal current offers a means by which the human being participates intelligently in the process of becoming. By repeatedly lifting attention from the senses and guiding it along the central axis, one accelerates changes that might otherwise take lifetimes to unfold unconsciously. This acceleration is not forced, it is natural, because it follows the original design of the nervous system. Attention follows energy, and energy follows attention. When awareness is trained to rest along the spine, the life force responds, withdrawing from habitual channels and reorganizing itself. This reorganization brings harmony to the mind and balance to the emotions. Old patterns loosen not through struggle, but through lack of fuel. As the spinal current grows stronger, the pull of distraction weakens, and inner stillness becomes more accessible even amid activity. The ascent of energy does not remove one from the world, it changes the way the world is experienced. Actions become less reactive and more intentional. The individual begins to respond from a deeper center rather than from surface impulses. This shift marks a significant step in evolution, for consciousness is no longer driven solely by survival or desire, but guided by discernment and inner knowing. The spine becomes a quiet axis around which life turns with greater order. Each moment of inward alignment leaves an imprint on the nervous system. Over time, these imprints accumulate, reshaping habits of thought and perception. What once required effort becomes natural. Calm ceases to be an occasional state and becomes a background presence. The practitioner discovers that peace is not dependent on circumstances, but on the direction of awareness. This realization itself represents an evolutionary leap, for it transfers authority from the external world to the inner realm. The spinal current also serves as a bridge between individuality and universality. As energy rises, the sense of separateness softens. One begins to perceive life as interconnected, guided by an intelligence larger than personal will. This perception is not philosophical, it is experiential, arising from a quiet expansion of awareness beyond narrow self-definition. Compassion flows more freely, not as a moral obligation, but as a natural recognition of shared being. Mastery of this inner pathway requires patience and sincerity. Progress is not measured by dramatic experiences but by consistency of awareness and depth of inner silence. Each sincere effort strengthens the current, refining the instrument through which consciousness operates. Even apparent stillness is active, for in that stillness the life force is being trained to obey higher direction rather than instinctive habit. The spinal current teaches that evolution is an inward art. By honoring this inner pathway, the human being learns to cooperate with the forces that shape awareness. Growth becomes intentional, guided by understanding rather than driven by suffering. The nervous system transforms from a battlefield of impulses into a temple of perception, and consciousness gradually learns to abide where clarity, strength, and quiet joy arise naturally, revealing ever subtler dimensions of awareness as attention continues to rise along its destined path. Breath is the most intimate expression of life force available to conscious awareness. It moves constantly between the inner and outer worlds, linking thought, emotion, and physical vitality in a single rhythmic motion. Most people breathe without awareness, allowing this vital process to be governed by habit, emotion, and circumstance. In doing so, they surrender a powerful instrument of self-mastery. When breath is observed, refined, and consciously guided, it becomes a precise tool for influencing the deepest layers of mind and energy, revealing itself as a scientific means, rather than a mystical abstraction. Every change in mental state is mirrored by a change in breathing. Agitation shortens it, fear disrupts it, calm deepens it, and joy refines it. This relationship is not accidental, it is lawful. Breath acts as a bridge between the voluntary and involuntary systems, making it uniquely suited for inner discipline. By learning to regulate the breath, one gains access to regions of the nervous system ordinarily beyond conscious control. This access allows the practitioner to calm internal turbulence at its source, rather than merely managing its surface effects. Controlled breathing does not mean forceful breathing. True mastery is subtle, gentle, and intelligent. As the breath becomes slow and refined, the life force disengages from muscular tension and sensory agitation. The heart quiets, the nerves soften, and awareness begins to withdraw from constant external engagement. In this withdrawal, the mind discovers a natural stillness that does not depend on effort or suppression. Thought loses its compulsive quality, becoming more spacious and luminous. The scientific nature of breath control lies in its repeatability. When practiced correctly, the same causes produce the same effects. A calm, rhythmic breath induces calm, rhythmic thought. A suspended breath leads awareness towards stillness. A refined breath opens perception to subtler states of consciousness. These results are not dependent on belief or temperament. They arise from consistent application of natural law. Just as physical exercise strengthens muscles through repetition, conscious breathing strengthens inner stability through daily practice. Breath is also the key to conserving energy. Much of human vitality is wasted through restless breathing driven by emotion and distraction. This waste leaves the mind fatigued and the will weakened. When breathing is slowed and regulated, energy is conserved and redirected. The practitioner feels renewed without external stimulation, discovering a reservoir of strength within. This conserved energy becomes available for higher perception, concentration and insight, accelerating inner growth without strain. As breath grows subtle, awareness begins to detach from the physical body. Sensations lose their urgency, and the sense of identity shifts inward. One realizes that consciousness is not confined to muscular movement or sensory input. This realization is not theoretical, it is felt as an expansion and a quiet freedom. The breath, once a mechanical necessity, becomes a doorway through which awareness passes into deeper levels of being. Scientific mastery of breath also harmonizes emotion. Emotional disturbances are patterns of misdirected energy. By calming the breath, these patterns lose momentum. Anger dissolves as energy withdraws from its reactive channels. Fear weakens as the breath steadies, and the nervous system regains balance. Joy arises not as excitement, but as a quiet contentment born of inner alignment. Emotional maturity develops naturally as breath becomes disciplined. The refinement of breath gradually alters perception of time. Rapid breathing binds awareness to urgency and anticipation. Slow rhythmic breathing expands the present moment, making experience richer and more complete. In this expanded awareness, intuition becomes clearer, and decisions arise from insight rather than impulse. The practitioner learns to act from stillness, allowing clarity to precede movement. Breath control also prepares the nervous system for higher states of awareness. As the breath becomes nearly imperceptible, the life force withdraws from sensory channels and begins to move along subtler pathways. This inward movement quiets the brain and refines perception. Inner light, sound, or deep silence may be perceived, not as imagination but as natural expressions of refined awareness. These perceptions arise spontaneously when conditions are prepared through disciplined breathing. Daily practice transforms breath from an unconscious habit into a conscious ally. Each session builds sensitivity, teaching awareness to recognize subtle changes and respond intelligently. Over time, the breath becomes calm even during activity, maintaining inner balance amid outer demands. This continuity of calm marks true progress, indicating that mastery is becoming integrated into daily life rather than confined to moments of practice. The scientific approach to breath honors simplicity. No complex beliefs are required, only attention, patience, and consistency. The practitioner observes, adjusts, and experiences the results directly. In this way, breath becomes both the method and the proof. Through it, one learns that transformation is not distant or abstract, but immediate and accessible. Waiting within the rhythm of each inhalation and exhalation, offering a direct means of guiding life force toward clarity, stability, and higher awareness as the breath continues to refine itself into ever subtler expressions of conscious control. The senses were designed as instruments of perception, yet they often become channels of bondage when awareness flows outward without restraint. Sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell continually draw attention away from the inner center, scattering life force into countless impressions. This outward flow creates restlessness, because the mind is never allowed to rest in its own source. Withdrawal of energy from the senses does not mean rejection of the world, but a rebalancing of awareness, teaching consciousness to stand at the center, rather than at the periphery of experience. When energy is habitually projected outward, the senses demand constant stimulation. Pleasure quickly fades, prompting renewed desire, and discomfort magnifies into suffering through resistance. This cycle is sustained by attention itself. Wherever attention goes, energy follows, and wherever energy flows repeatedly, habit is formed. By gently reversing this pattern, awareness begins to reclaim its power. The senses remain functional, but they no longer dominate consciousness. Instead of pulling awareness outward, they become servants of a centered mind. True withdrawal is an inward gathering, not an act of suppression. Suppression creates tension while withdrawal creates ease. As attention is drawn inward, the nervous system relaxes and the mind experiences a natural quiet. This quiet is not emptiness but fullness, a sense of presence that does not depend on sensory input. In this state, awareness begins to recognize itself as independent of constant stimulation, discovering a stability that remains even when the senses are active. The process begins with observation. By noticing how attention rushes outward at every sound or sensation, one learns the mechanics of distraction. This observation itself weakens habitual patterns. Gradually, attention is trained to pause before following sensory impulses. In that pause, energy collects. The mind feels less scattered, and a subtle joy arises from regained coherence. Each moment of inward pause strengthens the capacity for deeper withdrawal. As energy withdraws from the senses, perception becomes refined. The mind, no longer overloaded with impressions, begins to see more clearly. Thoughts slow, emotions soften, and awareness grows more spacious. This spaciousness allows insight to arise naturally, without effort. Understanding is no longer forced through analysis, but emerges quietly from within. Such insight carries a quality of certainty that does not depend on argument or belief. Withdrawal also conserves vital energy. Sensory indulgence consumes life force rapidly, leaving fatigue in its wake. Inward attention preserves and redirects this energy. The practitioner feels renewed not by stimulation but by rest in awareness itself. This renewal is deep and lasting, strengthening both body and mind. Energy once lost in distraction becomes available for concentration, creativity, and inner exploration. As the senses release their grip, the sense of identity begins to shift. Awareness is no longer defined solely by what is seen, heard, or felt. A deeper identity emerges, rooted in witnessing rather than reacting. This witness consciousness observes sensations without being driven by them. Pleasure is enjoyed without attachment. Discomfort is met without resistance. This balanced relationship marks a significant stage of inner awakening. The withdrawal of energy from the senses naturally leads to inner absorption. Attention gravitates towards subtler experiences such as inner calm, intuitive perception, and quiet joy. These experiences are not produced by imagination, they arise when the mind is no longer consumed by external input. Inner absorption deepens concentration, making the mind steady and receptive. In this steadiness, awareness gains access to deeper layers of consciousness that were previously obscured by sensory noise. Fear diminishes as inward awareness strengthens. Much fear arises from identification with external conditions and sensory threats. When attention rests inwardly, the sense of security becomes internal rather than dependent on circumstances. This inner security fosters courage and clarity. Decisions are made with greater confidence because they arise from a centered state, rather than from reactive emotion. The senses themselves benefit from this reorientation. Freed from constant demand, they become more sensitive and precise. Perception sharpens, appreciation deepens, and experience becomes richer rather than duller. Colors seem brighter, sounds more distinct, and simple moments more meaningful. This refinement shows that withdrawal does not impoverish life, but enriches it by restoring balance. Consistent practice gradually establishes inward awareness as the natural resting place of attention. Even amid activity, a portion of awareness remains centered. This inner anchor prevents complete absorption in sensory events, allowing calm to coexist with engagement. Life is lived fully, yet inwardly, without being swept away by changing impressions. Through withdrawal, awareness learns to abide in itself. This abiding reveals a quiet joy that does not fluctuate with sensory conditions. It is a joy born of wholeness, arising when energy is no longer divided. The practitioner realizes that peace is not something to be acquired, but something to be uncovered by removing the habit of outward dispersion. Each moment of inward attention reinforces this realization, guiding awareness steadily toward its own source where stillness, clarity, and silent fulfillment continue to deepen as energy remains gathered within the center of being. The stillness of mind is not an absence of thought, but a state of harmonious order, in which thought no longer dominates awareness. In ordinary consciousness, the mind moves constantly, driven by memory, desire, fear, and anticipation. This movement consumes energy and fragments attention, leaving awareness scattered across past and future. Stillness arises when these movements slow and align, allowing consciousness to rest in the present moment without strain. In this resting, clarity naturally emerges, revealing stillness as a foundation rather than a goal. Mental agitation is often mistaken for vitality. Yet constant thought does not strengthen awareness, it weakens it through dispersion. Each unnecessary thought pulls energy away from the center, creating fatigue and confusion. When the mind learns to become still, energy is conserved and redirected inward. This conservation brings a sense of quiet strength, a feeling of being anchored rather than pushed by circumstance. Stillness does not dull perception, it sharpens it by removing internal noise. The path to stillness begins with observation. By witnessing thoughts without engagement, awareness gradually loosens its identification with mental activity. Thoughts continue to arise, but they lose their authority. They are seen as passing movements rather than commands that must be obeyed. This shift transforms the relationship with the mind. Instead of being carried by thought, Awareness becomes the space in which thought appears and disappears. As observation deepens, gaps naturally appear between thoughts. These gaps are moments of pure awareness, free from commentary and judgment. At first they are brief, easily overlooked, but with practice they expand. In these moments, the mind rests, and consciousness tastes a peace that is independent of external conditions. This peace is not created, it is revealed when mental turbulence subsides. Stillness also brings coherence to emotion. Emotional reactions are often fueled by repetitive thought patterns. When the mind becomes quiet, emotions lose their compulsive quality. They arise, are felt fully, and dissolve without lingering disturbance. This emotional balance fosters maturity and resilience. One responds rather than reacts, guided by understanding rather than impulse. The foundation of accelerated spiritual growth lies in this calm clarity. Without stillness, higher perception remains obscured by mental noise. With stillness, intuition awakens naturally. Insight arises spontaneously, unforced and precise. Decisions become clearer because they are not clouded by conflicting thoughts. This clarity marks a significant stage of inner development, as awareness begins to trust its own quiet knowing. Stillness also alters the experience of effort. In agitation, effort feels heavy and exhausting. In stillness, action flows with ease. The mind no longer resists itself, and energy moves efficiently. Tasks are accomplished with greater focus and less strain. This efficiency extends beyond physical action to mental and creative endeavors, enhancing effectiveness without increasing tension. As stillness stabilizes, awareness becomes less dependent on external validation. The constant need for stimulation, approval, or reassurance diminishes. Contentment arises from within, grounded in inner equilibrium. This independence frees consciousness from habitual seeking, allowing deeper exploration of inner states. The practitioner discovers that fulfillment does not lie in accumulation but in alignment. The nervous system responds profoundly to mental stillness. As thought quiets, the body relaxes, and subtle tensions release. Breath becomes smooth, heart rhythms stabilize, and the entire system enters a state of harmony. This physiological balance supports sustained awareness, making stillness accessible not only during meditation but throughout daily life. Calm becomes a trait rather than a temporary condition. Stillness reveals layers of awareness previously unnoticed. Beneath surface thought lies a vast field of silent perception. In this field, consciousness feels expansive and unbounded. Identity shifts from being a thinker to being an observer, from being a door to being a witness. This shift does not diminish engagement with life, it enriches it by adding depth and perspective. The discipline of cultivating stillness requires patience. The mind resists quiet because it is accustomed to movement. Yet each sincere attempt strengthens the capacity for calm. Even brief moments of stillness leave an imprint, gradually reconditioning the mind. Over time, these moments accumulate, transforming habitual patterns and establishing stillness as the natural background of awareness. In this steady quiet, spiritual growth accelerates because energy is no longer wasted in conflict. Awareness gathers itself and moves inward with purpose. The path becomes clear not through effortful striving, but through receptive presence. Understanding deepens without struggle, and insight unfolds naturally as the mind rests in its own silent clarity, allowing consciousness to expand from this stable foundation into subtler realms of perception, where stillness itself becomes a living source of guidance, and strength. Daily practice is the meeting point between human effort and higher intelligence. It is through regular, sincere discipline that consciousness learns to cooperate with the deeper forces guiding life. Without practice, insight remains theoretical, and inspiration fades into memory. With practice, awareness becomes trained, refined, and receptive. Each day of conscious effort aligns the individual more closely with the intelligence already shaping growth from within. Cooperation with divine intelligence does not imply surrendering reason or personal responsibility. It means recognizing that life is guided by laws more subtle than personal desire. Through consistent inner discipline, one learns to work with these laws rather than against them. Attention becomes attuned to natural rhythms, and actions begin to flow in harmony with inner guidance. This cooperation transforms effort from struggle into participation. Daily practice establishes a rhythm that stabilizes awareness. The mind learns when to turn inward, and the nervous system becomes accustomed to calm focus. This rhythm gradually extends beyond formal practice into daily activity. Awareness remains centered even amid change, drawing strength from regular inner alignment. The stability created by routine practice provides a foundation upon which deeper states of consciousness can develop. Each practice session, however simple, leaves an imprint on the nervous system. These imprints accumulate, reshaping habits of thought and perception. Old tendencies weaken as new patterns of calm and clarity take root. This transformation is gradual yet profound, occurring not through force but through consistency. The practitioner learns to trust the process, understanding that growth unfolds through repetition and patience. Cooperation with higher intelligence requires listening as much as effort. In daily practice, periods of quiet allow intuition to surface. Guidance is felt as a subtle clarity rather than a dramatic command. This clarity informs decisions, relationships, and actions. Over time, one learns to distinguish between impulsive desires and intuitive insight, responding to life with greater wisdom. Regular practice also cultivates humility. Progress is seen as the result of alignment rather than personal achievement. This humility opens awareness further, making it more receptive to guidance. The sense of being supported by a greater intelligence grows naturally, bringing confidence without arrogance. One acts decisively yet remains open to correction and learning. As cooperation deepens, effort becomes refined. The practitioner expends less energy on resistance and more on alignment. Challenges are met with steadiness rather than anxiety. Even difficulties are recognized as opportunities for growth, guided by an intelligence that works through experience. This perspective transforms adversity into a teacher rather than an obstacle. Daily practice integrates spiritual awareness into ordinary life. It dissolves the division between inner work and outer action. The practitioner carries the fruits of practice into relationships, work, and service. Compassion becomes more natural, patience more available, and understanding more immediate. Life itself becomes an expression of practice, guided by inner alignment rather than external pressure. Through consistent discipline, awareness learns to yield to higher direction without passivity. One remains active and engaged, yet guided by inner clarity. Decisions arise from a quiet center, actions flow with purpose, and outcomes are accepted with equanimity. This balance of effort and surrender reflects mature cooperation with guiding intelligence. Over time, daily practice reveals an underlying order in life. Events appear less random, and experiences seem to align meaningfully. This perception is not imposed by belief but recognized through experience. Awareness becomes attuned to subtle guidance, responding with trust and discernment. Life feels supported, directed, and purposeful. The deepest benefit of daily practice is the gradual transformation of identity. One no longer experiences oneself as an isolated door struggling against circumstance. Instead, there is a growing sense of participation in a larger process. Actions are experienced as expressions of a shared intelligence, and effort becomes an offering rather than a demand. In this cooperation, spiritual growth accelerates naturally. The path unfolds step by step, guided by inner wisdom cultivated through practice. Each day strengthens the connection, refining awareness and deepening trust. Growth becomes continuous rather than episodic, rooted in a living relationship between individual consciousness and the intelligence guiding evolution, sustained and renewed through the simple yet powerful act of daily, sincere practice.